Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's Monday, time for another edition of the Post Up with David Grubb here on Boot Crew Media. I, of course, am David Grubb. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you. Hope you had a good weekend. We got plenty to cover. We're going to review the Pelicans Summer League, of course, and look back at that. We're also going to give some final grades to the players who were most important to look at this summer. We're going to look into the numbers. I promised you that at the end of Summer League, we'd revisit some of those per 36 and advanced numbers. We're going to look at those and see where this year's class does rank compared to those other classes in the Willie Green era in particular. And we'll see where there are some concerns and where there's some opportunities for the youngsters. And then finally, some other news around the New Orleans Pelicans that could be important this week or in the upcoming weeks as well. So let's start with that Summer League review. Let's get into it. Of course, as you know, the New Orleans Pelicans finished winless in Summer League, going 0-5, extending their record now losing streak in Las Vegas to 11 games, the longest in the history of the Las Vegas Summer League. So the Pelicans were the only winless team in Las Vegas. The results ultimately do not matter. Nobody tracks this, but the Pelicans are the only team in the league to have gone winless in the last two seasons. And going winless before last season didn't really portend a great season ahead. Not to say that this season will be as bad as last year's was, but I think what it does say when you look at this record is that it tells you that your young players maybe are not as far along as you'd like them to be at this stage, or that you can't rely on them as much maybe during the regular season as you'd like. And again, we'll go into this a little bit later, but let's start with the obvious. You got to start with the injury to Derek Queen in particular. One of the most important pieces of this entire exercise was to get Derek Queen on the floor and see what he could do. Queen had flashes of brilliance at times. He looked great as a passer early on, but that kind of fell off a little bit. He struggled with his scoring early. That picked up a little bit by the third game. But overall, some good things and some bad with Derek Queen. And I think that that's not unusual for somebody in his position as a first-year player. The Pelicans were looking for some answers from the young guys to figure out who's going to make it onto the roster and who's going to make it into the rotation. Who do they need to believe in as they get closer to summer camp? And I think you start with Jeremiah Fears, who didn't start well, got better over the course of 5 games. And I think that's really important to note, that he did improve basically in every game. Again, we will get deeper into his numbers, but I think the good thing is that you saw from him in those back-to-back 20-point nights. I think, and even in his ejection, and I had somebody in the comments say that, on the bird rights, because I wrote about a little bit of a summary of Summer League on the birdrights.com. You can check that out. But I wrote that Jeremiah Fears showed poise mostly throughout the Summer League. And then there was that incident where he was ejected late in the ball game in the second half, where he probably, could have put up some better numbers, maybe, done a little bit more. But ultimately, I think that was poise in a way. You want to see a rookie who's willing to stand up for himself and his teammates, who's willing to fight the good fight and not cross any lines. And I don't think he did cross a line. The ejection came. I get it. You put hands on another player, things happen. But it wasn't a fight. It was standing up for himself. And I think as a smaller guard, a guy who's not particularly a big player, I think you got to set that tone physically, that you're not going to be bullied. So I didn't have a problem with that. I didn't think that was a loss of composure. I thought it was a guy standing up for himself. And sometimes you take a loss on that overall, as far as the way the league operates and the way referees operate. I get it. You don't want to have fights in Summer League. The refs had to shut that down quickly. But overall, Jeremiah Fears standing up for himself is not a bad thing. You go into Antonio Reeves, and he did, I think, what he was supposed to do. Was it was his play perfect? Not at all. But he was the most consistent scorer on the team, shot it pretty well. He was aggressive in his scoring because that's what he came to do. He didn't come to be a point guard. He came to show that he was an offensive player. He doesn't particularly, do a lot of shaking with the basketball. He's not super athletic, but he does score consistently. He's dependable in that role. And I think that that's a good thing for the Pelicans. Hunter Dickinson had some moments as well late in those last 4 and 5, the fourth and fifth games of Summer League. Physicality, rebounding, some post presence, some defense. The Pelicans need to figure out if he does fit into the roster construction especially now with the loss of Derek Queen. What do you do with Hunter Dickinson? You have him on a two-way deal. Do you try to give him a bigger role as you get closer to the regular season and you worry about Derek Queen's injury that could take that they said that they will reevaluate in basically 3 months, and that's reevaluate. That doesn't mean that he'll be cleared to play in 12 weeks. So, with Derek Queen gone, what will the Pelicans do with that? And what does that mean for Hunter Dickinson, who showed, again, some flashes at times? The biggest question that hovers over all this of the Summer League is ultimately about Zion Williamson. He wasn't there. He didn't play, nor should he be. But going into year 7, everything that the front office is doing, and I've said this multiple times, is that Joe Dumars is building everything right now around Zion Williamson. Whether we agree with the way he's building it, that's clearly his focus, is to build this team around Zion Williamson. They're not going into a full rebuild, even though they built these younger players, but they're also haven't gone all in either and try to bring in and go over the salary, the into the luxury tax in trying to find additional talent, because you see this arms race in the Western Conference in particular of teams trying to get exponentially better really quickly. You look at what the Clippers have done this offseason in particular. They've been a team that's been very aggressive. You look at Denver, and they've been aggressive in adding Jonas Valanciunas and trying to and then subtracting some of their players around him and making around Nikola Jokic and trying to make that team extend their window. You see the Oklahoma City Thunder locking in their players, but the Pelicans have put their fortunes in the hands of Zion Williamson, and his potential obviously is super high. His talent is super high, but he's not, and I'll put this politely, the most dependable person to build around. So if everything is good, and that's the problem when you talk about the Pelicans, if everything is good, and there's no season for any team where everything goes well, there are going to be challenges. There are going to be setbacks. There are going to be injuries for every team in the league. How do you handle those? Are you that dependent on one player? And we've seen this with other teams that have had great players. It's not that the Pelicans have to continue to win at the same clip when Zion is off the floor. That's not possible, obviously, for most teams to lose your best player and continue to play at the same level. But what you have to have is a group of players around Zion that can at least tread water. And that will be the question about this roster construction. Is it built to not only thrive with Zion, but play well without him? And we will see what happens. But ultimately, what did we learn from Vegas? We learned the Pelicans have some talent, but they still need a direction. We still need to understand what players' roles are going to be. We still need to understand what the Pelicans' identity is going to be on both ends of the floor. Who are they going to be? How are they going to play? We don't really know that. So with a crucial season with Zion Williamson in the middle of all of this, and a roster that still needs some tweaking to get to where it needs to be, there are concerns with the New Orleans Pelicans. All right, let's move on to these final grades for the Pelicans. And as we look at this, I wanted to separate them into groups. I think that there are about 9 players that we want to look at in particular. And I'm going to go with the rookies first, and I'm going to give them their grades, and then we'll go into the rest of them in kind of a grouping. But I wanted to start with Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears. So if we start with Fears, he was one guy who gave fans a reason to be hopeful for the future. He gave fans a reason to watch games, scoring 20 points and the 22 points in back-to-back games at the fourth and fifth games. Was able to keep up with the speed. Looked like he started to figure out the physicality as the game's going on. Absolute quickness. Needs to be better in the pick and roll. Nice floater at times. Able to finish around the rim, which is something the Pelicans have really lacked. And he looked like a leader. The thing I will say about Jeremiah Fears is that he looks like a star. Whether or not he becomes one is up to him and the Pelicans to a degree, but ultimately it's on him. If Jeremiah Fears does the things that he's supposed to do, he has all the qualities that you're looking for in a franchise player. He has the look of a franchise player. He has the voice and maturity of somebody who's coming in to take control of a franchise. He has the game in order to do that. That needs to grow and expand and develop, but he has the building blocks that you see of being a lead guard in the NBA and running a team. So he has all of the requisite skill sets. He has all of the requisite intangibles, that it factor. And I think that was evident. Now, there is so much inconsistency in his play for a young man who can create his own shot, and overall saw his stock really rise from some disappointments in games 1 and 2 to seeing his stock really rise over the final 3 games. And again, he looked better than most 18-year-olds would. He didn't try to force things. He just didn't make shots. But he really has a problem defensively. And he's really inefficient overall. So my overall grade for Jeremiah Fears is a B minus C plus. And I'm grading him based on what I think his potential could be. And there was just so much inconsistency for him in this first summer league. And there was just so much defensive problems for him on the court that it's, again, the upside is there, but can he be a regular and consistent contributor early? I would say no. Derek Queen, certainly it's harder to evaluate him because of the injury, and you didn't get 5 games, but you got 3. And so for Queen, the skills that you want to see as a polished big, the guy who had a versatile skill set inside, who could take people off the dribble, you wanted to see improvement there. He raised his shooting percentage over the course of those 3 games, which was important. He started to figure out how to play against taller players with more length, like he did with Yang Hansen. So he started to build some chemistry with his teammates when the spacing was there. You always saw him looking to make passes, even though his turnovers were really high, but you saw him trying to do things well. And so I think you saw the kind of effort on offense that you wanted to see improvement in each of the 3 games. Defensively, again, a real struggle for him, but I think I'm going to give him a B as well. Not a B minus, but I'll give him more of a B because of his elite rebounding. He set the new standard for summer league rebounding with 11 rebounds per game. Eve Meeski was right behind him at 10.7. But Derek Queen, that kind of performance on that end and his ability, showing that ability to score, he's a little bit higher to me. If all things were considered, and Derek Queen wasn't injured, his game would still be a little bit higher to me as far as its development goes than Jeremiah Fears. Again, I think the path to being on the court is shorter for Derek Queen than it is for Fears at this stage. Queen has a big upside. Fears has big upside. They both need time to develop. Both of them will be inconsistent early on, and I think that they will get better as the year goes on. But I'm good with those grades. The only player I gave an A to, and it's a soft A, more of an A minus, is Antonio Reeves, because you look at what he did do offensively in particular. He had the highest offensive rating among the regulars. He had the highest net rating among the regulars. His offensive rating was 126 while he was on the court. His net rating was 16.4. That's very, very solid. And that's what you expected for him going into this second summer league for him. You wanted to see him perform better. And he did perform better than he did in his first summer league appearance last year. He did the things offensively to be more consistent. He didn't do a great job distributing. That's where the takeaway is. But to give that kind of overall impact, and it didn't matter who his teammates were, I think that for Antonio Reeves, in establishing himself again as a threat for that final roster spot and pursuing Jordan Hawkins for that role, I got to give Antonio Reeves that kind of credit. The other B I'm going to give is to Trey Alexander. Now, Trey Alexander only had one really good game. But in that game, he showed all the reasons that the Pelicans brought him in. An ability to knock down the 3-point shot, an ability to score in transition, an ability to shoot the basketball really well. Trey Alexander, I give him a B as well. The C group is the biggest group. Eve Meeski gets a C. He did rebound the ball really well, 10.7 rebounds per game. He's now the second all-time shot blocker in a single summer league for the Pelicans at 2.3 blocks per game. So you saw that kind of consistency for him on the defensive end. He also had a high number of offensive rebounds, but his offensive game, as far as shooting the basketball, was so abysmal that you can't give him anything more than a C. That the offense it felt like a setback for him. You just wanted to see him do the things that he's going to be asked to do during the regular season. Can you operate in the pick and roll? Can you finish above the rim? Can you finish out of the dunker spot? We didn't see much of that out of Eve Meeski, and I think that was disappointing. Keon Brooks, who had some good games at the end of last year, came into this. His counting numbers weren't great. His on-court impact was higher than than his statistical production. So I give him a C. Hunter Dickinson, we've already talked about him and what he did this summer. He gets a C. Again, not great, not terrible. He gave you what you thought you would get out of him, a C. Micah Peavy didn't play enough games. First game, really good. Last couple games, not as impactful. So Micah Peavy gets a C. Lester Quinones is the only D of that group because he started out really well in the first 2 games and then just completely fell off a cliff the last 3. So I'm giving him a D. His one job was to come in and knock down shots. He failed to do that over the course of the 5 games. Started out hot, got cold. So I give Lester Quinones a D. So those are my grades. Antonio Reeves A, Derek Queen and Trey Alexander B's of varying grades. The C's, Eve Macy, Keon Brooks, Jeremiah Fears, Hunter Dickinson, and Micah Peavy, and then Lester Quinones bringing up the rear with the D. The other part for Queen and for Fears, while Fears did a really great job scoring, their turnovers, and we've talked about their turnovers, were a problem. Both of them have the new, jumped above the previous high for turnovers per game in Summer League. That record was held by Julian Wright, who did not have a great NBA career. But I'm not comparing those guys talent-wise or skill-wise to Julian Wright, but Julian Wright had 4.7 turnovers per game in his Summer League appearance. Queen and Fears both blew that out of the water, with Fears at 5 and Queen at 5.7. So the turnovers there were just a big problem for both of those guys, and that also brings your grade down. Let's go to the numbers and revisit those per 36 numbers that we looked at last week after the first couple of games. And so let's start with the per 36 averages. As you see there, Jeremiah Fears raised his per 36 scoring average up to 23 points per game. And both he and Queen got their shooting percentages over 40% from the floor. Fears never got that 3-point percentage over 20%, finishing at 18%. And then you look on the back end of that, not a lot of steals, not a lot of blocks between the two, though Queen did get better, finishing with 1.3 blocks per 36. But the turnovers, you look at there, both of them above 6 turnovers per 36, and then a lot of fouls as well compared to the rest of those first-year members. Again, I'm going to grade those. There's a curve there because when you look at this, what you do notice, and you'll notice this through both the per 36 and through the advanced, the guys who had more experience coming in, the guys who played 3 or 4 years in college, when you look at most of the number sets outside of the per game, the scoring averages, but when you look at field goal percentages, 3-point percentages, free throw percentages, those areas and their overall contributions, the older guys did better. And that's not a surprise. It's just showing you, it's not that they're all better players, though I would say, Trey Murphy, when you look across the board, he's kind of the gold standard. And we'll get into that a little bit more on another slide, and you'll really see how good he was. But I think you'll also see the concerns with the younger players. Let's go over to those advanced numbers now. And what you'll see there, and I wanted to limit this to the players who played at least 3 games, because I thought there were guys who in different years played 1 game or 2 games. That just wasn't enough. You had to play a minimum of 3 games in order to make this chart. And on the advanced side, you see again, look at the offensive rating line. Fears and Queen at 87 puts them more in line with Herb Jones, Jordan Hawkins, Jose Alvarado when it comes to their initial impact on the offensive end. But the concern is on the defensive end, because when you look at Alvarado and Jones, both of them were able to get positive net ratings because their defensive ratings were still really good, below 80 for both of them. But when you look at Fears and Queen right at 100 at 99.7 and Fears at 108.7, 108.1, the only player worse than Jeremiah Fears defensively was Antonio Reeves last year. And then you see the gap between what Reeves did offensively, and Reeves was even better offensively this year, better defensively this year. But Jeremiah Fears, his 108.1, it actually got worse from his 2-game number. It continued to get worse game after game. He narrowed that net rating gap by getting better on the offensive side, raising it from a below 70 at one point up to this 87.1 that you see after 5 games. But when you go over to that final column, the PER column, Both of those guys below 15. 15 is average, but it's not necessarily bad when you look at Derek Queen, whose number is pretty consistent in line with guys like Antonio Reeves, better than Yves Missi was coming out of Summer League last year, better than Herb Jones, better than Jose Alvarado. That's at least again, when we talk about Queen being closer to getting on the floor than Jeremiah Fears, this is what I'm talking about. The contributions there are a bit more noteworthy because Jeremiah Fears' contributions comes really in one area, and that's his ability to score the basketball, his point tallies. So that's why his PER is so relatively low, very close to Jordan Hawkins, who did not have a great rookie year. But you look at these other guys, it's generally consistent between that 13.4, 12.9 of Herb Jones to ultimately that 29.2 of Trey Murphy. You see the impact. You see that those guys, the higher guys, came into their first season. And again, that Kyra Lewis on the bottom has an asterisk next to it because Kyra's first summer league was going into his second year with the Pelicans, was not able to play his first year. So he had already had a year of NBA experience under his belt. So you'd expect his numbers to be relatively good coming back for year two, which they were. So now you take the first chart, the 36 get per 36, you take the advanced numbers and we put them into an overall rankings. So I made this simple for you by color coding it. The green numbers are where a player finished first, second, or third in the ranking of these 10 players. The numbers go 1 to 10. The yellows are from 4 to 7. 4, 5, 6, and 7 are your yellows. Okay. If you finished in that middle group. And then your reds are your bottoms, 8, 9, and 10 compared to this group. So let's start with the gold standard again of Trey Murphy. Trey Murphy there's 16 categories here, combining the categories from the per 36 and the advanced numbers. Trey Murphy had 13 of his 16 categories in green. The other 3, he finished at 4. So Trey Murphy was one position away from having, 3 spots overall from being perfectly green, finishing number 1, 2, or 3 in every category. The only categories where he finishes second or third, points per game, because Jeremiah Fears passed him there, 3-point percentage, rebounds per game, and blocks per game. So everywhere else, Trey was number 1. And you look over at his total, and what I did was add everybody's total up from where their positions were. Trey was at 32. That's his average ranking by position across those 16 was 2. Nobody did better than that. Everybody else you see on that right-hand column finished pretty much in the yellow zone, except for Jordan Hawkins, whose average position was 8.1. But when we go to the rookies and you look at that Jeremiah Fears number, his total was 119. 119. His average position amongst these 10 players is 7.4. He's in the danger zone, right? And the players that you look at with the most reds, Jeremiah Fears with 11. The other is Jordan Hawkins with 8. No one else has more than 6 than those 2 guys. And the biggest reason those 2 guys have all those reds, inefficiency. Inefficiency. You see where the offensive numbers are. You see where the defensive numbers put them in the reds. You see where their nets are. You see where their PERs are. You see where their turnovers are. They are at the bottom of your efficiency on the offensive end. You see where field goal percentage ranks. You see where 3-point percentage ranks. You see where free throws are. They are low in all of the categories that you need them to be high in. And both of those guys have very similar profiles. Fears at 119, Jordan Hawkins at 130. They're the only 2 over 100. So that's where your fears are, no pun intended, with Jeremiah, is that the inefficiency is going to keep him off the court. That if he's turning the basketball over, if he's missing a lot of shots, if he's not getting to the free throw line, and if he's missing his free throws when he gets there, that is not a great combination for a young point guard. But again, the emphasis is a young point guard. This is what they do. They mess up. It's a hard position. So this is not a condemnation. It's just showing relative development at this stage of their careers. Because when you look at those bottom 5 guys, and again, those are the most experienced players of the 10. The bottom 5 are the most experienced. None of them go above 90. None of them go above 90. The only player below 90 in the top 5 Antonio Reeves, who again came in with a lot of experience, who played 5 years of college basketball. So your players with the most experience were the ones most ready to contribute in their first seasons in the NBA. You didn't get a great first year out of Jordan Hawkins. Yves Missi thrown into the fire, but you see Yves right along the middle in most of these categories. A lot of 4s, a lot of 5s for Yves Missi, some 8s and 7s in certain areas, but you could see defensively he was going to do similar things to what you see in his summer league profile. So as good and as talented as both Fears and Queen are, you have to worry a bit about their initial ability to compete, but more so for Jeremiah Fears and his ability to compete with top-level point guards in the NBA immediately. And when you look at those class averages, when you take the class of 2025 with Queen and Fears put together, their average number is 105.5, which is only ahead of Jordan Hawkins, whose overall number of 130. The 2024 class, their average was 93.5. That's Antonio Reeves and Yves Missi. And then the 2021 class, those 5 players, this is how stark that difference is. Their average, those 5 players, was 77.8. So when you look at the number of top 5 finishes by player, Trey Murphy, all 16 of his in the top 5. Antonio Reeves, 10 top 5s. And Najee Marshall, 12 top 5s, the only 3 to make double figures there. So I think that was just, some good numerical comparisons to find out where these guys are in their stages, this nascent stages of their career. How are they going to develop? And I think you saw there the relative positioning between them and previous classes. And ultimately, it comes down to this. Experience is better in everything. When you've had more experience, you're going to do better initially. That doesn't mean, as Antonio Daniels has said plenty of times, that doesn't mean growth is linear, but it's where your starting point is. And the veterans start with are further along the road than those rookies who did not get a ton of experience in college. So we'll see how quickly they can close that gap. But I think, again, the first couple of months of the season are going to be rough for those young guys. All right, some final news before we go today. Just a couple of things for the Pelicans. The first thing is the Pelicans' potential pursuit of Malcolm Brogdon, the former Rookie of the Year, the former Sixth Man of the Year, has not been one of the most healthy players in the league. Over the last 4 seasons, he's only played in 166 of a possible 328 games, so that makes him a risk. But NBA insider Jake Fisher has said that the Pelicans are one of 4 teams that have a lot of interest in Malcolm Brogdon, along with the Sacramento Kings, Minnesota Timberwolves, and Golden State Warriors. I think obviously the Timberwolves and the Warriors offer you a better chance at winning immediately, especially for a guy who has missed a lot of games. Sacramento and New Orleans probably maybe need him a bit more. But the Pelicans have a roster full of guards. They have Jose Alvarado. They have DeJounte Murray. They have Jordan Poole. They have all these guys. They have Jeremiah Fears. They have, just a number of guards already. So I don't know how Brogdon fits into that rotation and if he fits style-wise for what the Pelicans are looking to do. He could be a good veteran for a young team, but you've already signed Kevon Looney for that. And if you have a second veteran who's not playing also, if Brogdon's missing games, that influence means nothing. Veterans who don't play, unless you're talking about a guy like Udonis Haslem, veterans who don't play don't have a lot of sway. These kids don't care. If you don't play, what are you going to tell me? What are you going to tell them? Even if you've been in the league 15 years, they don't want to hear it because you're not playing. And I think that will impact any kind of decision for that. I just don't see Brogdon as a fit, and I don't understand why these kind of rumors have persisted. For the Pelicans, they have bigger needs, particularly in the front court now with Derek Queen potentially being gone for at least 3 months. You also have to deal, when we talk about the center position, they are rapidly running out of options. You had a slight overpay for Kevon Looney, but that's the deal when you're the Pelicans. When you aren't a great winning team, when you come from a franchise that does not have a track record of success, you're going to have to pay a tax. Talked about that before. You're going to have to pay a little bit more than market value for some players to get them to come and play for you. But now the center market is very, very thin. There are only about 5 reasonable options for the Pelicans, and the first 3 are very old and very limited, and I don't know if they could play. Tristan Thompson is on the market at 34. DeAndre Jordan on the market, 37 years old. Taj Gibson is on the market at 40. That's an average age of 37 for those three guys. None of them seem like viable options for the Pelicans. The younger options, when you look at a Thomas Bryant, who's still on the market and who only was paid about $2.5 million last year, $2.8 million last year. And then you have a Charles Bassey who played for the San Antonio Spurs, and he's 25 years old and got about $2.5 million last year. Those are reasonable options when the Pelicans have roughly $3.7 million left of the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. So if you look at that, because that's the gap basically between them and the luxury tax, and they are not going to go into the luxury tax yet for this team. So if you're only about 3.7 million, that should be enough to get you in the market for either Bassey or Thomas Bryant and try to make a move and get those guys. It doesn't look like the Pelicans are in a rush, but they need to find some kind of solution in their front court. You can't go into the season. You can't do it with just Carlo Makovich, Kevon Looney, and Yves Missi as your center rotation. That's just not enough. And as your power forwards too, because Zion Williamson, again, he may be the nominal power forward when the starting five is announced, but he's not going to play a traditional power forward role. It's just not going to happen. He's going to be on the perimeter so much more. He's going to be driving to the basket with his, with a full head of steam. So much more. He's going to be facing up 99% of the time. So if that's the guy you're giving the ball to, you need some length, some height, and athleticism in that front court position. And the Pelicans just don't have enough of it. They are certainly going to be a team that tries to outrun their opponents. Fine, but you got to be able to rebound or run. And the Pelicans look like a team that's going to be iffy on its rebounding. You have two legitimate rebounders in Yves Missi and Kevon Looney. Both of them have been good, solid rebounders so far in their careers. Obviously, Looney a decade in the NBA. So they've been proven rebounders. Zion Williamson is not a great rebounder. Herb Jones is not a great rebounder. Jordan Poole, not a great rebounder. Trey Murphy is getting better as a rebounder, but he rebounds better as a 4 than he does at a 3. But you can't play him at the 4 all the time because he's just not physically built to be a 4 all the time. So if you're playing small ball, you can play Trey as a 4, but you want to limit that. You don't want to get him hurt playing above his weight class all the time. So, the Pelicans have to do a lot of gang rebounding this season as we expected them last year. I remember before the season, we talked about potentially DeJounte Murray leading the team in rebounds, and he did that several nights for the Pelicans because they just didn't have the interior presence to dominate the glass. That's what they're going to have to do this season again. Whew. All right. That should do it. I've talked long enough, I think, for today. We'll be back again tomorrow with our Tuesday episode. Leave your comments below, your questions. If you want me to answer those, leave those as well. Give me your impressions about what you saw at Summer League and your thoughts about the grades that I handed out. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the shows here on Boot Crew Media. You can follow me on social media at DM Grubb on Twitter, on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook, TikTok, and Blue Sky. And don't forget to check out thebirdrights.com when you can for Pelicans news, game recaps, all kinds of stuff there. Until the next time, this has been the Post Up with David Grubb right here on Boot Crew Media. I'm David Grubb. Y'all have a great day.